Good evening all on Play Chess Comment and streaming to YouTube. Okay, hi all. I just want to check if the audio is okay on Play Chess. Is the audio okay? I hope it is. We will continue looking at the World Chess Championship of 1972 this week. Game 7, fascinating game, very exciting actually. Game 7, quite a meaty game. So in this game Boris Spassky was playing white. Fischer, what would he choose against e4? Boris Spassky kicked off with e4, which I think was the first time in the match actually, 1 e4 that Spassky had played. Okay, Fischer chose the Sicilian defence, and are we in very heavily prepared territory from the Russians? Was Fischer a bit concerned about this? Playing like this, knight f3, d6, so we go into an open Sicilian. C takes, knight takes, and we have the Najdorf variation, so a6. Okay, so very well trodden territory. And actually I'm going to just check with Livebook as well, connect to Livebook, and also put on an Endgame as well, just in case that might be useful. Alright, for questions and stuff. Okay, here in Livebook the most popular move is bishop e3 overall. In the game, second most popular, bishop g5, and black usually plays e6 here. And now we have this very sharp move f4. So this is entering the so-called poison pawn variation. The poison pawn in chess is usually the b pawn, getting a queen offside to grab a pawn. So that's the poison pawn. It seems to have been neglected by the bishop, running away from home, and then not only a neglect of b2 but also closing the road back to protect c1 with this f4. White's intentions, maybe e5 in the future as a little break, queen d2 and castle queenside, that would protect the b2 pawn. But here, yeah, the most theoretical and sharp move is chosen. Which is queen b6. This is the most popular move by far in this position. Another move, bishop e7, you might think is interesting. That's actually also being played quite a bit, over 2,000 games with that, but that's the most popular, queen b6. So we have queen b6 and white plays queen d2, offering this poison pawn. Very sharp line. So queen takes b2 was played. There's nothing much else here. If black doesn't grab the pawn, I think it's going to be, well, white can take or castle queenside and has a pleasant enough position. So yeah, black wants to test white here. Queen takes b2, and the most usual move is rook b1 in this position, gaining an immediate tempo on the queen. Actually, this next move might have surprised Fischer a little bit. Instead of gaining that immediate tempo, we have a knight retreat, which is the second most popular choice in live, but a knight retreat. And actually there's a concrete threat here in this position if black's not careful. I just want to show you some venom of this. It's protecting the rook, right? And Spassky in the game, this was Spassky's move. Fischer in the game played queen a3. Now let's just imagine queen a3 isn't played. What is white threatening? Say h6. we have bishop takes, just as an example. A3 would engulf the queen. There's rook A2 next, trapping the queen. The two knights are covering and protecting all of these squares. Not like this. All of these squares are protected. So yeah, it's threatening to trap the queen with A3 and rook A2. So yeah, there's an emergency here to get the queen out after knight B3. And this is the usual move, queen A3. And quite often, without prompting, does actually snap off F6, which you might think is a bit weird, but it seems to be the most popular path here. Bishop takes F6. Another one is bishop D3, second most popular. And actually in the game we do actually go with the second most popular move here. Spassky plays, instead of bishop takes F6, bishop D3. So what's this about? Black has been given an opportunity, it seems, not to be threatened with the doubled pawns, not to have the double pawns here. But white retains that dark square bishop. Is this going to be a really dangerous piece here? We see bishop e7. And, okay, white castles. We're mostly off the beaten track. It's about 11 games in live, but now we're totally come off the rails, nearly. Really come off the rails. So this is probably unfamiliar territory for Fischer. What does he do here? Has he actually analysed this position? It's a very, very sharp Sicilian defence position. He's hoping perhaps, you know, he knows enough here to cope with this. We have knight c6, the usual move, but actually here slightly rarer, h6 now, trying to prompt white to give up the dark square bishop. So, okay, the bishop goes back to h4. Actually, it doesn't give itself up. Okay, so in this position, isn't this asking for something, bishop h4? It does actually remind me of something recently that I've posted, one of my own blitz games where I played bishop h4, not really knowing the theory, and black snapped with similar mechanism here. Knight takes e4. If you don't take on f6, these bishops, this is actually looking like a tactic which has been missed, because it's actually hitting the queen, it's hitting the bishop. Is this a missed tactic by Spassky, or is this to be welcomed, this position? So it's fascinating now what on earth is going on. If we just look at the main continuation for a moment in Livebook, in this position, there's 5 games with bishop takes f6 and 2 with bishop h4. They continue, for example, there's 4 of them that continue like this with e5, knight e4. It looks pretty dangerous. Knight d7, a couple of games like this. Very sharp positions, very, very sharp. Unclear really. It's looking dangerous. If you were playing black, you'd probably be a bit worried by, you know, white's f file here, the doubled rooks. You know, white's got all his pieces out. Black's rooks are still lurking around on the back row. They're not really connected up yet. Can black really survive this position? Yeah, you know, it's scary. Black has got 2 extra pawns. Okay, but we have this bishop retreat instead, so bishop h4. So which allows, it seems to allow this tactic, knight takes e4, which is given actually as the engine top move. But isn't it a little bit on the materialistic side by Fischer? Isn't he wasting a lot of time here? Could this really backfire? Knight takes e4 is played, but no, the queen from a3 is protecting d6. So it's not as if black is losing d6, he takes on h4. White's idea seems to be just, he's now, it's a gambit. Quite scary, a 2-pawn gambit. and he's making it into a potentially 3-pawn gamut now with f5. It's already 2 pawns down here, but look at black's pieces, they're scattered on all the 4 corners of the board. There's a bishop over here, there's a queen over here, these rooks haven't connected, there's not much development. Yes, black's 2 pawns up, but this looks like quite a scary position. The engines will say otherwise. Oh, black's okay. Sure, if you can defend amazingly, I'm sure black's okay. What does Fischer do? He has to play quite accurately, one would imagine. Surely, white's rooks are connected, everything's potentially on full blast here. How does he react to f5? Let's have a look. He actually took here, which, grabbing another pawn. Okay, if he plays e5, is there a disaster? Probably that's not too hot after f6. It would seem, you know, black is, it's a lesser evil to just take on f5, it seems, than allow this position with f6. If we have this position, let's have a quick look. Here, bishop c4, controlling d5, controlling the diagonal. Black dare not castle, we're just going to get mated, surely. This is looking actually quite grim. If knight d7, knight takes d6, yes, protected by the queen. This does look quite horrible for black. It's to be avoided, this position. So, you know, Fischer has to play like almost like a computer here to defend this position. Although 2 pawns up, you know, as I say, his pieces are scattered. So we have e takes f5. And actually, with the king in the centre, now we see a very dramatic move from Boris Spassky indeed. So 3 pawns down now. So he's going to try and extract some compensation here in terms of king safety. Can you see what Spassky played? Some of you might not have seen the game. So Spassky's play, for those that haven't seen the game, what would you play with white if I give you 20 seconds here? So white's play. Any ideas? What would you play with white in this position? Oh yeah, if you're on Play Chess, please move away from the notation tab for these guess the move ideas. There are a few tempting moves, maybe, available. I mean, d6 would be nice to win d6 to kick the king a bit. One way you could do that is queen f4, but maybe Spassky chose a better way. He just gives up a bishop. So we've got pressure on d6 now from 2 pieces to win d6. Fischer took this. I think this is the best move, the best continuation to take this. If he doesn't, things, I think, get horrible. Say king f8. Bishop c4, and there's all sorts of nasties on the horizon. No, best to take that bishop before it has a vengeance on the diagonal. If black is not getting mated, that is, knight takes d6 check, king f8, and the bishop is regains by white. Knight takes c8. It's a very, very interesting position. What is white actually threatening here now? I think there's a few things. Just taking this would expose maybe that f-file, maybe a queen invasion. In the game, knight c6 was played, and there's a kind of weakness of the last move. And I have a recent theory about the weaknesses of the last moves. If you can spot them, and you can actually exploit them. You end up playing actually kind of scientifically accurate moves based on the very last move in the position. A scientifically accurate move worth investigating, which didn't exist in the position before. The knight's no longer covering d7. And actually this has been mentioned by kibitzers at ChessGames.com, well, some at the time, who actually saw this game at the time, mentioned there was talk actually about queen d7 being quite interesting here. Let's have a quick look at queen d7. In the game the knight was retracted, but queen d7 exists as a move. In the game knight d6, but let's have a quick look. It's a weakness of the last move. What would happen on queen d7? What is the idea? Maybe rook takes f5 and we've got coordination on f7. What does black do here? Maybe black just protects f5 as a matter of priority and to try and get the king to run to g7. Interesting. How would it continue? Here? Here? Then what? It would seem black has adequate defensive resources actually. If the knight comes here, we can block for f7 to be protected. It seems okay, in fact, for black this position. Not so easy to crack the position. So anyway, worth checking out queen d7. But Spassky actually played knight d6. There's a few other moves. There's some engine suggestions here about this. Queen f4 is one of the engine suggestions, just to hit this guy. If bishop g5, what's the point? Queen takes f5, we're hitting f7. Strongest move for black might be just to take that. Might be. This position again, g6. Here, king g8. And again, how do you crack black's position? Might not be easy. Okay, so queen f4, yeah, I don't think there's an easy bust here. Knight b6, hitting the rook. If the rook moves. This position is interesting. If g6, queen h4, queen takes h4, black might actually have queen a7. Okay, this is a tactical idea. Just exploiting that knight on b6. So yeah, black's got plenty of resources here. The knight actually goes to d6. So technically actually black stands well, but you'd be very concerned here with black. How can you survive this? Are you going to get hacked? Basically, that would be the question. A typical club match, usually the side, I think statistically, that has gambited the material and has got the attacking initiative. Statistically, they win in a club match because it's kind of easier to go on the attack. It's easier, you know, the defender has to just miss one thing and then they're blown to bits. I mean, that's the brutality that I've kind of noticed as a club player over many years. It's a brutal position. You've got to play extremely accurately here with black. What are white's primary threats? Well, rook takes f5 and maybe queen d5 as well. These are the two primary threats, both converging on f7. There's significant compensation, sorry, just mentioned on stream, there's significant visual compensation. The two rooks are not connected. Black's queen's over here, there's bishop over here. The pieces are scattered. How does black actually defend this accurately? Okay, in this position, Fischer seems to choose what the stockfish top move actually. Fischer actually calmly pins this knight. Rook d8 is played. So now if, yeah, we're just going to take this knight off if rook takes f5, surely we're just going to take this knight off. There's nothing there. So it actually forces white to do something. If queen f4, yeah, just queen takes d6. This position, I mean, is better for black after g6. there's no problem. So we see knight takes b5 actually offering virtual exchange of queens here. Actually, if rook takes d2, knight takes, black will be fine here with rook d5. Rook takes d2 seems plausible. Fischer actually chose maybe even a more accurate move, keeping the queens on. But it does seem plausible just to take on d2 to accept white's invitation for the exchange of queens. A little quick check on that. Rook takes d2, knight takes. What's the matter with playing from this position? Rook d5 protecting f5. What is the matter with this position? If black gets in g6 and crawls the king out to g7, then this rook's ready to run. What does white do here? g3. Yeah, it seems white's okay, but in the game, yeah, white's no, it seems black's okay, just taking the queen off. Maybe a lot of people would be tempted with that simplification, but yeah, Fischer chose queen e7. Queen e7, keeping the queens on. We have queen f4, and it's also protecting the bishop, of course. g6, getting ready to connect the rooks, and it seems, what's the problem? The bishop's also controlling this square quite usefully, in fact. So where is white's compensation? Is Fischer going to get away with this? Was the poisoned pawn not so poisoned? White's a pawn down. These are double pawns though. Are they that significant, the double pawns here? In fact, there's a 2-to-1 over this side of the board. Is the endings actually that bad? If there's a 2-to-1 over here, couldn't white create a pass pawn? In any case, in an endgame scenario. So anyway, we see a4. Bishop g5. Queen c4. Now the bishop entrenches itself, bishop e3 checks centrally and gets support. f4. This looks very, very pleasant for black. It seems Fischer's slightly risky materialism seems totally justified at this point. On the other hand, hold on a sec, this looks a little bit like what you get from a King's Gambit, and Spassky's pretty good at King's Gambits, blasting open f-files. And funny enough, the move he plays here kind of reflects that. As long as he's not getting mated on light squares, this move seems plausible just to try and blast open this f-file, g3. Okay, so what happens here after g3? I think this looks too dangerous to take this. It might actually be plausible though. It looks pretty dangerous. It's plausible. I can't see an immediate, there's no immediate nightmare about that. But yeah, Fischer chooses perhaps the even better move. Just protect it and keep the f-file closed just in case. Keep the lines closed. That's an important defensive principle for king safety. Don't create any more open roads than needed. Rook e1. Okay, now we see queen b4. Technically, this might be a slight inaccuracy. Actually, queen b4. Maybe rook g8. Maybe this is the way. Just try and cling on to things. See what white's got. What does white actually do in this position? Anyway, so Fischer now wanted the exchange of queens. It seems to have changed his mind from earlier. But actually, this isn't so terrible here. White does take the queens off. Okay, he's a pawn down. Only one pawn down, right? After rook e2, defending c2. This pawn's a little bit vulnerable to knight a5, maybe. But in the meantime, black finally connects rooks with king g7. But we have this knight a5. Is this a nuisance? The pawn protects itself by moving. Knight c4 on the bishop now. But also both knights control d6. They're helping if they want to pop in there. Then maybe after f5 could be fun. We see knight d5 reinforcing the bishop, and in fact a knight does go to d6. So now, interestingly, okay, there's access to this weak square, and also these two pawns can potentially help each other create a pass pawn on the queen side. So even though technically white's a pawn down, actually white could be the one potentially getting a pass pawn. At the moment the bishop controls quite a few key squares. This looks unlikely. We see bishop c5. Where does the knight want to go? Is f5 actually significant here after bishop c5? Let's have a quick look. If knight f5, I believe actually king f6 looks dangerous to white, or king g6 even. If white protects, then that's a protected pass pawn. That looks terrible. And in fact h5 anyway. That's just that's unplayable. This is a very bad position if knight f5. Very, very bad it seems. So a much better move, knight b7. Hitting the rook. Rook c8. c4. The knight goes into e3, which looks rather tasty central square. A very aggressive central square. Hitting the rook. We have rook f3. Is Spassky actually threatening anything now? Yes, of course he is. This pawn, threatening to take and take again. This pawn is vulnerable. But isn't he just giving up the c4 pawn? Yes, it's an exchange of pawns. Knight takes c4, g takes f4. But trying to keep this line closed, we have g4. It was the double pawns. It was double pawns anyway that Fischer's just got rid of. So I think he's still okay. He's got things under control. His rooks are connected. His pieces seem okay. Rook d3. We have h5. Are these pawns going anywhere? Is there something like this on the cards? Maybe. h3 trying to break up the pawns. Black also has some resources like rook h6 in this position. He actually played knight a5, but it might actually be possible to take on h3. It looks very greedy. If check, I mean king here is possible. And the point is, if white now takes, there's good coordination I think emerging. Black seems to be okay anyway. It's good bishop here for the moment. Maybe something like this. What is white doing? He's not getting enough time to cause any problem for the black king. But anyway, yeah. No, we see knight a5 challenging this distant knight on b7. That moves to d6. Hitting the rook. And here, the knight can actually be pinned. Maybe that's an interesting move, just pinning the knight. Fischer actually snapped off the knight, giving up his dark square bishop. He wanted maybe to get this check in. And now knight c4. Very tactical game. But here, unlike earlier, it seems knight f5 check is far more useful than earlier. It's interesting. Knight f5 check might be okay. Maybe it's going to e7. That wasn't chosen though. Knight e8 was chosen. King g6. And we have h4 locking down the h-pawn. Possibly white might be interested in this sort of thing. We have f6 controlling some key squares like g5 in advance. Spassky attacks the f6 pawn. Fischer checks. King g1. Okay, here, interestingly, the engine choice for black is very interesting in this position. In the game, Fischer chose king f5. Which looks a little bit what's going on-ish. We have knight g7 in the game. If taking here, king e4, and this is actually very, very good for black. For example, check, king takes d3. What does white actually do? What does he do? If he moves the rook, rook takes e8. Yeah, that's the sort of winning material, it seems. If he moves here, rook takes e8. Yeah. So no, that's not playable to take the pawn. There's like this hanging and this hanging. Can't take the pawn in this position. But no, there's an interesting idea instead of king f5, which is actually rook takes e8. This exchange attack is interesting for knight d2, trying to get into f3. That rook and knight coordinating. This is quite interesting. Here, check. And it should be okay for black. This position should be okay. There's an adequate compensation, it seems. But yeah, Fischer chose actually, he didn't take that knight. It seems as though there might be adequate compensation. Yes, this king f5 instead. But what does white do here? Well, he doesn't want to take with the rook. He plays knight g7 check, inviting the king to come down the board. King takes f4. Move 45, we have rook d4 check. King g3, threatening mate in 3 with the check. Got the opposition of the kings here. White plays knight f5 check. And king f3. And white virtually forces a draw now, with rook e4, threatening nasties on the king here, starting with that. This is a threat of mate in 5 if it was white's move, actually. So here Fischer has to go in for a draw by repetition. He plays check, check, and yeah, draw by repetition. Yeah, it was an interesting game, I thought, game 7. Quite a fighting draw, not like these kind of modern short GM draws. It was actually a really fighting draw. And a very, very exciting variation. So Spassky had sacrificed 2 pawns, not just the poised pawn, another pawn, then a third pawn, then a bishop, then got 1 pawn back, got his bishop back. For a long time, technically, Fischer was better in the game, but white had compensation all the way through. H4 was the sealed move, apparently, according to Bumpy Charity on stream. The sealed move, H4. Let's go rewind a little bit. So move 41, yeah, after the time control. Apparently this was the sealed move at H4. Engine suggestion is actually knight d6 here. Rook h6. It's crazy looking. Rook h6. Wow. Or rook a8. This is just madness. What is this about? If taking, I think maybe this is like trouble. Oh, it's still okay for black. Yeah, well anyway, h4 move 41 was a sealed move. So yeah, there was a kind of adjournment period. After move 40 it was like adjournment. And yeah, so they came, that was a sealed move. h4, thanks. I trust you on that. Bumpy, I'm hoping that was the sealed move, in fact, h4. It does seem plausible. So yeah, an exciting game. Has anyone got any questions? It's pretty hot here in the UK today. It's like the hottest day of the year. So I'm not planning on covering another game from the match, but I'll take questions about this game now. Or I could quickly review it if you want. Just take it for another spin at a faster pace. What would you like? Does anyone want a quick playthrough or not? I can try and do a summation on a quick playthrough if you like. Okay, someone does, so I think I will. Alright, okay. In game 7, Boris Spassky played e4 for the first time in the match. Fischer played his tried and tested Najdorf Sicilian. We have a very, very sharp variation for a World Chess Championship match. We have this poison pawn variation. So black it's the most popular move in this position, more than anything else, to just go for this b2 pawn here. The classic poison pawn variation. We have queen d2. Slightly unusual is knight b3. Usually rook b1 is played. This is more theoretical, approaching 1500 games, where games run often like this. Very, very sharp games often run like this. There's still hundreds of games even from this position. It's just very, very heavily analysed, this sort of thing. There's even 73 games even from this position. This is how theoretically analysed this is. You really need to know all your theory in this line. Apparently black's okay here, according to live book. Black's okay here. Been a bit greedy on the queen side. You might think, what's the relevance of the queen over here? Well, actually the rook's sort of been activated with the pawn over here. This is just one of the deep lines where my plan's got this resource rook h6 here, and he might actually be surviving this position. It's crazy stuff, because you know, as black, it's like you are literally playing like a computer. You're not castling, you're doing weird rook moves, your rooks are not connected, your queen's just being greedy. But anyway, all of that was avoided when Spassky just did this knight b3, this kind of sideline move, knight b3. It was all avoided. So maybe, you know, had Fischer really analysed knight b3 a lot. According to the recent interview I saw, Walter Brown interviewed by Yasser Serwan, when Walter Brown was still alive, rest in peace Walter Brown, he had made a note that Fischer had got this red book of all of Spassky's games and had literally kind of memorised this red book of all of Spassky's games, and was actually challenging people to open up any page of this red book on Spassky and he could recall the entire game. And there were like thousands and thousands of moves. There's actually quite a large number of Spassky's games in this red book. I think it was a red book. So yeah, I don't know, maybe this had cropped up in a previous Spassky game. I'm not entirely sure if Fischer was totally on his own after knight b3. It's not the mainline move. But anyway, We have queen a3. The queen's got to escape, because otherwise white's going to threaten to engulf this queen with a3 and rook a2. So this seems to be the top move for the queen to escape and to protect d6, which is useful because if bishop e7 taking here, you want this pawn protected. It's going to be a key center pawn. And again, a second out of book move is played here. Usually in this position, bishop takes f6 is actually played, denting black's pawn structure. There's 300 games here. This is the usual sequence. For example, like this. There's 20 games from here. And it seems, again, another very dangerous looking position. But if black knows what he's doing, apparently he survives this position. It's scary, but this sort of thing has been played a few times before. But yeah, the usual move is bishop takes f6. Spassky again chooses a side move. Only 20 games compared to 300 with bishop d3. So first we had this knight b3, and then we got this bishop d3. What is going on here? Fischer plays bishop e7. So we have quite an unusual position where this bishop h4 basically offering another pawn, a gambit pawn with bishop h4 instead of taking on f6, allowing this seemingly interesting tactic, knight takes e4. So attacking the queen, attacking the bishop. So 2 pawns down now. White is 2 pawns down, but this f5 is very dangerous. It can't be left because of f6. So it's taken. So 3 pawns down, then sacrificing a bishop. 3 pawns and a bishop down in this particular position. 1, 2, 3, 4. Black has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And yeah, it's just that black's pieces were not developed. Strange position. Okay, white's getting a pawn back and then gets the bishop back. The king has been inconvenienced. The bishop, by the way, is still covering d8. There's no threat of queen d8 here. The bishop's covering d8. But knight c6. And we saw knight d6. That is interesting. So knight d6. Rook d8. Knight takes b5. And instead of getting the queens off, which might be a simple choice, Fischer chooses to keep the queens on. He's confident enough in this position, and maybe with this retreat is also saying, you know, this bishop can get a tempo and get itself on e3, perched on e3 quite happily via tempo gains, which happened. But first attending to protect the pawn, but this is still on the cards, still controlling e1. There's no chance for rook e1 to evict the queen yet. So we have this maneuver, bishop g5, bishop e3, centralized bishop protected. White tries to rip open the f-file, as though it's a King's Gambit style position. Black supported this. So black has merged the pawn up and is about to improve coordination of pieces. So the thing is, it's difficult to play for black still. Maybe this is technically a mistake getting the queens off here, because it seems as though the compensation persists now after queen takes. Because white's knight a5 is a nuisance. That's a nuisance square. It's not covered by the bishop to hit the pawn. If something like b6 was that actually possible, maybe taking, yeah, maybe it was. So knight a5 was in fact allowed. Okay, so we have knight a5. b6, knight c4, knight d5, just reinforcing e3. It's a very complicated game. It's like white is chasing down some compensation after the queens have been, come off. Very complicated game. Knight cd6. Bishop c5, putting pressure. Knight b7, rook c8, c4, knight e3. Rook moves. Fischer keeping things seemingly under control though. He's basically undoubled his pawns with this exchange of c4 for f4. He's undoubled his pawns there. So black should be in good shape still. And technically I think black is in good shape still after all this. h3. Knight a5. Chasing knight d6. Takes. Check. We have knight c4. Trying to get more simplification. But then we have this check on e8, which was interesting. h4, and this is the point where there's technically, it seems, after f6 again, it's interesting that, you know, black, that should be fine. And he has actually got a protected pawn here. His rook's active, his knight seems not bad. But, you know, rook e6 is setting black some problems. So rook takes f6 is now on the cards. That would be dangerous to allow rook takes f6. We have check. Now the king coming to f5. Possibly, it seems rook takes e8, as pointed out, is an interesting exchange stack at this venture. Just to remind you, knight d2. It seems that black has good compensation here for the exchange stack. But yeah, he played instead king f5. This just goes into a draw now. It seems white is basically forcing a draw, forcing black to carry on the checks. So yeah, really complex Sicilian defense. It's hard actually to think about generalizations from an instructive point of view. It's not the sort of line, you know, that's positional. The Sicilian defense poison pawn variation. Tons of theory. It's like sidelines were chosen a little bit by Spassky. Okay, so okay, we'll carry on next week with game 8. I think at this point Fischer's leading the match by 1 point still. So game 8 next week, unless something else of greater interest turns up, it will be game 8 next week. So I hope you have a good week and survive the heat wave if you're in the UK or in Europe. So yeah, comments or questions on YouTube. Okay. Thanks very much. See you next week.